That is my favorite day of the year now. This was, I think, my third or fourth Fall Fest. Can't remember. Fall Fest usually get pretty blurry towards the end of the day, anyways. But yeah, this one might be my favorite. The event is the reason why I live in Knoxville. One of my very first experiences with the town was Fall Fest, and I was like, this is incredible. And it seems to only get bigger and better every year.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 183, we have Philip Darden back on. Philip is the Executive Director of the Southern Off-Road Bicycle Association, otherwise known as SORBA. During this conversation, we recap some of the more notable events that Philip was able to attend in 2024, how the region was impacted by multiple hurricanes, along with some of the changes that will be implemented in 2025. In other news, I am working on getting back on track with releasing episodes more regularly throughout the winter, and we have a good cast of characters lined up for you. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. Cattle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Cattle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Cattle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Cattle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Cattle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Philip Darden and SORBA Maine. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Philip Darden. Philip is the Executive Director of SORBA. I think they call it SORBA Maine. I call it the mothership. But SORBA is a organization that represents mountain bikers in the Southeast, if you're not familiar. Philip's also been on the show before, and they have their own podcast. But SORBA represents 7 states and 47 chapters of mountain bike organizations. How's it going today, Philip?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
Doing good. We're in the fall as we roll into I think it was made up by Facebook or something else, but we're rolling into what we call Giving Tuesday here in the next couple of weeks. And so we're kind of ramping up how we talk about giving back to local mountain bike organizations.
Yeah, and you say fall, but seeing the window in your background, it looks quite wintry out there.
That's just because it's bright. If you actually look out the window, it's green grass still, but it did snow 2 days ago.
Okay.
So we're definitely, it's that season.
We got a nice wintry mix last night in Knoxville, snowing in the mountains.
Yeah, I mean, there is a ski area in Gatlinburg, right?
Yeah. Yep, sure is.
And that's not very far away.
No, it's not.
So let's talk about some things that are happening with SORBA. You guys are currently in the midst of rolling into a new membership opportunity. Let's talk about how those changes are, because I think those changes will come with some positive impacts for your organization, and it'll be good to let people know just exactly what that means for them and what that means for SORBA.
Yeah, we're excited about the opportunity. We have we decided to take on our own membership and move away from the IMBA platform. And it's not like we hate IMBA. It's not like we want to break up with IMBA. I've seen so many different ways that people have put it in emails, and I try to make sure that the point is that we 100% support what IMBA does on a national level, and that we want to be good partners with them continually. but we also feel like that there's a need for us to be able to manage the membership in the Southeast and make our own choices. It's IMBA is such a big organization and it's such a big ship. In order to make those changes, it's challenging. Whereas, I think Mike Gayhard put it really well over in SORBA Chattanooga. We're kind of like a startup in a sense, and we can be a little bit more nimble in our changes. And if we do it well and things go well, perhaps it's something that IMBA might consider doing. We're working with them, letting them know exactly what directions we're going, who we're choosing, why we're choosing it. Because, if it goes well, SORBA can be one of those test pilots for a possible solution for some of their organizations across the country.
Yeah, it's agents of change.
Yeah. And again, like the people at IMBA are great. We have a great working relationship. They do incredible stuff on the national level. Things like the Explore Act, the biking on long distance trails, appropriations for the Forest Service. They're there in DC fighting for those funding for our public lands and for mountain bike trail access. So the importance of that relationship can't be understated.
Yeah, and they also partner with American Trails and have their own grant opportunities, for getting more trail on the ground and rehabbing trail. Their grant opportunities would be most notably the Trail Accelerator Grant, which I think your region and my region have both benefited from. We've seen a lot of trails that were put on the ground, and that was due to good planning and design. That wasn't construction. That was planning and design that led to construction.
Yeah, and that Trail Accelerator Grant is, a good plan gives you a good start. It gives you something that you can fundraise off of. And we've had a number of chapters and a number of trail systems across the region that have utilized that grant process. Same thing with the Dig In grant, like the crowdsourcing Dig In grant that's funded through IMBA. A chapter can apply for that, and it's a small amount of money, but that small amount of money is good seed money for trail projects, because a lot of organizations are really active and really engaged, but might not have the free funds in order to execute, like say an RTP grant. It's a reimbursement style grant. So you got to have money in order to execute this money that may be given from the government.
Yeah. Let's talk about Root for the Future, which I think is a nod to how SORBA does have deep roots in terms of it goes back to 1989.
Yeah. So when we were trying to develop the fundraising initiative and a name for it, we wanted to accentuate the fact that SORBA's been around for 35 years. And we wanted to, have it like the Root concept also has kind of like a mountain bike-ish sort of connotation to it. Like people love rooty trails, some people at least. And we wanted to have our future based on how we were previously, where SORBA was maintaining all of our own stuff. And we were from a membership management and from a organizational management side of things, we're a pretty independent organization. So, my graphic design and marketing background, that's kind of where we went with it. And the initiative is geared towards raising money for this transition of taking on our own membership. And that requires a lot of things outside of just a membership platform. We need to include a new staff person. We need to bring on our own HR stuff. So currently my payroll is handled through IMBA, and I'm technically an IMBA employee. And we want to be able to provide those services for our chapters that are quickly adding staff of their own to their local organizations. So bringing on HR to our own, bringing on a new staff person, this new platform, and then also giving us a little bit of breathing room in our budget so that we can make sure that cash flow isn't going to be an issue. Because, again, having those HR services means that we need to have a little bit of a backlog of cash so that we can, make sure people's paychecks go through and don't bounce. So we set up the initiative. It's the first major capital fundraising campaign that I've been a part of, and the first one that I can think of for SORBA in a very, very long time. And it's going well so far. So we set out to raise $125,000. We're currently right at about $100,000, and there's a lot of momentum behind it. And it's been really great to see. One of the most interesting things with it is our chapters that have supported it. We didn't require any of the chapters to give anything extra outside of what they already do, which is a split in the membership dollars. Like SORBA retains some of each membership in order to pay for the services that we provide. So we decided that we're going to do it all on our own. If chapter decided to give money, that's great, but we weren't going to make it a requirement. And to see the support from our organizations on this transition has been incredible. Like we have chapters that are willingly giving, hundreds and thousands of dollars towards this initiative. And I think that always goes back to what the strength of SORBA is. We have a long history of being an actively engaged group that supports each other throughout the region. And I don't know, it just makes me so proud each time a chapter decides that they want to give us some cash, and it's an investment to their future as much as it's an investment to SORBA's future.
Well, and speaking of SORBA organizations, SORBA has a podcast, and podcast episode number 8, it was like a reverse interview. Typically, you and Jen are the ones that interview the guests, but this one was Natalie Narborough. I think that's how you pronounce her last name.
Narborough, yeah.
Narborough, who is the executive director of Pisgah area SORBA, and she was interviewing you on exactly what this transition is. And so for those that want to get into the details, there's a good podcast interview out there that was just released. I want to say it was mid to late September.
That sounds about right. Yep.
So you go into more depth there with Natalie, and you have a great podcast.
Well, and truth be told, our podcast came from one, Jen, who is our development director. When she was even being interviewed, she was like, you guys should start a podcast. I think that's a great communication tool. And then my experience on your podcast was like, sure, yeah, I think that this can be something that would be fun and we could do. So we just kind of took it and hit the ground running. And when we were coming up with an idea about how to communicate what the transition would do and how to fund it and all those things, we thought the podcast would be another element. Like we've done videos, we've done blog posts, we've done emails, and the podcast was just another way to get the information out, because that's one of the big challenges of any transition is just the awareness of what's happening. And so we wanted to do a podcast interview, and it just made a lot more sense rather than me coming on the microphone and basically dictating all these things to have somebody who's a chapter leader who's known throughout SORBA region and is an incredible communicator. If you've ever seen her give a public talk or whatever, Natalie does just an amazing job communicating. I think that comes from her history as being a school teacher, but she was 100% open and willing to it. And I thought it was a great means to share some information and, have it in a way that's engaging and somebody wants to listen to it. If it's entertaining and it's engaging, it's a good method to share a little bit of information that could be boring and dry at times.
Well, and it's a way to provide some of the nuance in the conversation too. That you don't always get out of a news article or, a Facebook post or whatever the means of conveying something, or even a news report, where sometimes you get just snippets of what the actual whole message is.
Yeah. It's like reading an email with the voice in your head being the wrong voice. There's no reflection in it. There's no emotion in that voice that you're reading an email to, and you may misinterpret what the intention is. So I agree. Like the podcast and the verbal communication is a good way to have that inflection and to understand exactly what's going on.
Part of this change with this membership platform is you're currently hiring for a new membership director. Maybe you can give the pitch on what that might be in case that person that may want to apply for that position is listening.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we needed to be able to provide is a conduit between our technology provider and SORBA. And that's going to be a big lift because we have 47 chapters and 10,000 members. That's a lot of people that could be communicating with you, especially initially. Like, we want to get this pretty right the first time. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be problems. We're entirely aware of that, but as much as we can minimize that, they're the best. So the position is going to be twofold, where they're going to be the membership representative, and they're going to work with our membership platform. And they're also going to be helping on the fundraising side of things. So it's, your membership is your donor base. And to be able to acknowledge that and to be able to work with our members and have good communication with them and make sure that our members are feeling like they're a part of the organization, both on the local level and the regional level. It's an important move for us to make. We did, unfortunately, Jen decided that she was going to move on because her and her family had a great opportunity to move to Bend, Oregon. So they're moving across the country. So at the end of the year, Jen's going to be packing up and moving to Oregon with her family, which is, it's an incredible opportunity, but we're going to really miss her presence. She's been a great add to the SORBA team. And, I'd like just to give her a little shout out. Like, she's been one of the best coworkers I've ever had. So it's a sad day when she said it. I mean, I'm happy for her family, but for me personally, it was kind of a bummer.
Is this where I insert the joke that I insert every time I learn of somebody moving to Bend, which is they just want to get closer to the last standing Blockbuster video store, which might not even be open now?
I didn't even know that there was one over there, man. But like, she's been showing me pictures because her husband's already out there. Like, they've gotten a ton of snow. Like, they're looking to have a pretty banger snow season. And she's a ski instructor and has worked for a long time at a small hill here in North Carolina, Cataloochee, on the weekend. So, I think she's excited to have that West Coast snow and to have a big mountain. And yeah, I am incredibly excited for her family, but, sad to see a good coworker go.
Well, let's talk about some of the other things that SORBA does, which I think is incredible that you guys actually host biannually. Is it biannually? Twice a year? Twice a year, we'll just say.
Yeah.
SORBA Summits. And usually at one of your various different organization locations. I think the one coming up in the spring is going to be in Henderson, if I'm not mistaken, or Brevard. Actually, Brevard.
Yeah, it'll be in Brevard.
Yeah. So let's talk about what, just the kind of the elevator pitch of what SORBA Summits get SORBA leadership, for all the different 47 chapters.
Yeah. It's a catalyst for knowledge sharing is really the entire purpose of our SORBA meetings. So the fall meeting is typically smaller, more geared towards SORBA leadership. And the intention of that is to really give like a state of the union of where SORBA is, and then provide opportunities for our chapters to communicate within their state. So we have breakout sessions based on the state that they live in, so that they can talk about the issues and the successes that are going on in their state and what they want to see, almost like a strategic planning session of what they want to see statewide moving into the next year. And then the spring meeting, which is our summit, that's kind of our big showcase event each year. It's a multi-day event. We provide, various training between Forest Service chainsaw certifications, trail crew leader training. We've been adding some leadership training to our docket. And when I say leadership training and these others, these are multi-day, long session trainings. Whereas we also have essentially a conference, which is geared around a theme. And those are going to be typical conference style sessions. They're like an hour or so with a few breakout sessions. But at the end of the day, it's geared around the sharing of knowledge, both from a SORBA perspective and then also providing ample opportunity for our chapter leaders to mingle, oftentimes with a beer in hand, to be able to share the ideas about what they've got going on across the region. Because, as somebody that led a chapter for a while, you can kind of feel like you're on an island if you don't have these communications with other people. And as mostly volunteer run nonprofits, time is of the essence, and you don't have time to reinvent the wheel. If there's somebody else that's doing it, figure out how they're doing it and copy it and take your own spin on it rather than building something up from the bottom up. And that goes for like agreements, like MOUs, to events and races and fun stuff. It's a sharing of all that knowledge. And for the longest time, I've felt like that is SORBA's biggest advantage and benefit, is the ability to share that knowledge across our chapters.
Yeah, that is huge. And I've always, mainly look at whatever media comes out of those events because I haven't ever attended one. But I've just thought, like, what an incredible thing. The only other organization that I know of that's doing anything like it, and I don't know of everything, so somebody will probably correct me, but is really the PTBA. But that's more of a national and worldwide thing, where yours is I don't want to say hyper focused, but pretty hyper focused on your 47 organizations in your 7-state region.
It is. We do open up the summit to anybody. So we've had people come from Texas, from Ohio, Kentucky, all these places outside of the SORBA region to our summits, and we welcome it. It is a way to share the knowledge. Our fall meeting is specifically for our chapters, but the spring summit is 100% geared towards anybody that feels like it would be beneficial for them. And I personally think that they're a ton of fun. Post Helene, we were pretty scared that Brevard wasn't going to work out. There were a lot of question marks on what was going to happen. And when Natalie and the team at Pisgah SORBA agreed to push forward with it, I think that there was both a big sigh of relief and then a lot of excitement for not only us, but it's been interesting since the storm because they wanted to make sure that the trails and the communities are good, but they also lost a lot of their economy over that time period. And us bringing a summit into Brevard and having it in a town that right now probably could use the economic benefit of an event of our size, they're excited about it. We're excited about it. It's going to be at the Brevard Music Center, which is just adjacent to Bracken Mountain. One of my favorite trails in the area. It kind of sucks and is kind of type 2 fun because the initial climb is a bit of a challenge, but it goes straight into the fish hatchery. And then, from the fish hatchery, you can ride the new Butter Gap Loop. You can do a lot of big rides. So it's an incredible location. We're super stoked to be there. And I think that there's going to be some cool things that will be announced soon about that weekend and what we're doing there. So it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, that was a topic that Daniel and I discussed at length, which is how their economy post-Helene is really suffering because they don't have the people coming into town that they used to have, and they're so reliant on tourism, and he said, come on over. And in fact, I even saw, as of me recording with Daniel a week or so ago, the grandfather district was still closed, but I saw that via Instagram, if that is quality information, that the grandfather district is now going to be opening back up.
They are. I had a call with Michelle Mitchell from Region 8 yesterday. Her title is one of those typical Forest Service titles that's really long, but she deals with recreation, among other things, for the National Forest System and across Region 8. So not just, Pisgah or Nantahala, but like the entire region. And, there is a lot of work that's going to need to be done. And the grandfather district is one of those areas that got hit pretty hard. I think that the Brevard area, for the most part, kind of came away pretty okay in the grand scheme of things. Whereas everything east of Asheville, Old Fort, Brevard, Boone, Appalachian, not Brevard. So Old Fort, Grandfather, Boone, Appalachian regions, like that's all. There's a lot of question marks still in that area. I've seen pictures of the new gateway trails where you can't access the parking lot because the entire bridge is downstream. There's a lot of work still to be done over in that area, but it's positive to see that they are opening back up. And yeah, local economies right now, they're over there are struggling. And I do a quick plug to say, if you do have a desire to go to Western North Carolina, double check and see what places are open, but definitely go make the trip and go visit some folks.
I also saw that Jeremy Poor, one of our mutual friends, is back at it with offering trail training, both from U.S. Forest Service side of things, but also their community pump track.
Yeah, they've got, I think it's this week, they're out there with Peter Mills from Elevated Trail Designs, and they're doing a pump track class where they're building a pump track for the town of Old Fort. I'm super stoked to go see his new classroom space. I've heard nothing but good things about it. It's right in the middle of downtown Old Fort. Jeremy's a great and passionate dude, and I'm excited to see where that goes now. I think that they got a good thing going on.
For sure. Well, since we're talking storms, maybe we should talk about other storms that unfortunately impacted the Southeast. And before we hit record, you had mentioned that you were down in Florida and got to see some of the stuff that was impacted by Hurricane Milton. Maybe you could go into that since we haven't covered that nearly as much. I don't even think it was covered as much on a national level as Helene.
Yeah, and it's, for lack of a better word, it's a tale of two storms. So the Milton storm damage is interesting because, Florida, being Florida, a lot of it's lowlands. And for instance, there's a trail in just outside of Flagler, Florida, that one of our chapters, Faster, does work on. And there's a large portion of the trail that's still underwater, almost a month later, because of how much rain and storm surge came in and just basically flooded the entire area. So they've got a half of their trail system currently underwater, and they're just essentially waiting for it to recede so that they can get back out there and clean up that section of trail. And then over in Orlando, they've been working, day in and day out, opening one trail at a time. They still have one trail system that's, along a river base that's still closed, and it's down trees. They're, per the land manager's rules, they're not allowed to operate any equipment, so the land manager employees have to go out there and cut the trees out. And it's interesting because, and I think you could say the same thing with Helene and Milton both. It's incredibly devastating, but the resiliency is also equally incredible. Like the amount of time that both our Florida chapters and our North Carolina chapters, and honestly, like a place that hasn't gotten a lot of attention that, one of our chapters is Augusta, Georgia, and the Fats Trail System. They're cutting out literally thousands of trees in order to open up the trails. And, for instance, one of their trails is near a river. The flood stage of that river is, I think, 19 feet, and it was reported to be over 43 feet in Augusta. I'm telling you, the trails there are going to need probably some of the most help in the region, just because of how much blowdown they have and how small their team is. They're not the biggest team out there. So we're putting together work days from a regional level to go out there and support them and have people come from, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee to help, that are certified sawyers to help out with the cleanup efforts. But yeah, the resiliency is staggering. You hear stories both on the trail side and then also on the community side about, people banding together, coming together, helping their neighbor out, and just doing monumental efforts day in and day out, and continuing to do it because there's still so much work that has to be done.
Yeah, it'll be years before, and it's never going to be the same. Like when you say blowdowns to that magnitude, like that's a whole trail system that lost a lot of canopy. Yeah. You know how important canopy is to trails.
Yeah. Yeah. And when speaking with Michelle from the Forest Service yesterday, that was one of the big aspects, is that, not only is there going to need to be trail restoration, but there'll need to be like entire forest restoration. And they made the numbers public. I can't remember where I found the article yesterday, but it's somewhere in the billions of dollars of damage that is being requested by the Forest Service in order to rebuild not only the trails, but the forests themselves. And it's going to be a huge effort.
Well, let's talk about this on a national level. One of the other things you've done this year is you've gotten to be, I don't know if it's a partnership or a friendship or a relationship with the Outdoor Alliance.
Yeah. So earlier this year, I was asked to apply for their Grasstops initiative. And what that is they selected 20 people from across the country through all their partner organizations. So us being with IMBA, I was able to apply for this position. There were a couple other mountain bikers there, but we had folks from Winter Wildlands, Surfrider, hiking, Patagonia, backcountry runners, the gamut of human-powered outdoor activity. we had multiple online sessions that were led by Outdoor Alliance, and it was specifically about working with your representatives. So talking with legislators, setting up meetings both on the local and the federal level. They paid for us to fly up to DC earlier this fall and spend some time on the Hill chatting with our representatives, setting up meetings, advocating for the Explore Act, advocating for Forest Service appropriations, and actually doing the work. Not only were they training on this, but they were giving us the opportunity to actually get in there and make a difference. This is a cohort that they're going to do regular trainings. It is a heavy lift. Every other Tuesday for the better part of 6 months was a 2-hour Zoom webinar session. So it was an intensive training, but for me, it was invaluable. Like it was such a great experience. And of that, we're working with Outdoor Alliance for funding for relief efforts. I've had meetings with fellow outdoor recreation enthusiasts, with Senator Tillis's office, Senator Edwards' office in North Carolina, to advocate for funding for relief on recreational aspects, trails, guides, outfitters, those types of things, like making sure that the outdoor industry is represented in these relief packages, because it's such a huge part of the industry and the economy for Western North Carolina and the entire region.
Yeah, I could imagine. So with that, what was maybe a surprise or something that kind of caught you off guard that you maybe pulled from that 6-month intensive training and then going to the Hill?
I think one of the more surprising things is, I don't know, like I had this sense that it was going to be like senators and representatives are kind of untouchable people. Like you really, they're there to represent you. And I did air quotes for people that can't see it. They're there to represent you.
Nobody can see it because I don't do video.
Yeah, I don't do video on ours too. That's too much to try to edit. But air quotes, they're there to represent you. So it seems like, your connection with your lawmakers it really isn't there. But truth be told, it was fairly easy to set up these meetings with their staffers and to actually get into the offices in DC. I mean, you go through a screening that's same as an airport, and then you're walking down the halls of, every lawmaker's office within this building. And we sit down and have these conversations. Again, all of ours were with staff members of the office. We didn't meet with any of the actual lawmakers, but the conversations were great. They were easy. I think that we benefit from outdoor recreation being a nonpartisan. It's not even bipartisan. It's a nonpartisan issue. Both sides of the aisle are appreciative of the efforts of outdoor recreation and are interested to hear what you have to say. And if you imagine, they average, I think, 14 meetings a day in every office. So not one person is taking 14 meetings, but if they're 30-minute meetings, that's 7 hours of meetings that are happening with constituents every single day. And I look at that and I'm like, man, that just seems so exhausting. And a lot of times, you're having people come in and they're talking about the big three. They're talking about gun control. They're talking about abortion rights. They're talking about, a lot of things that are important, but at the end of the day are they're highly emotionally triggering conversations. And so when we come in and we're talking about mountain bike trails and rock climbing and whitewater paddling, it's like, okay, we can breathe a little bit. Like this is going to be a fun meeting that we can talk about and try to connect with, because, everybody in those offices does something outside, like whether or not it's hiking or mountain biking or fishing or whatever, but there's something there that you can connect with somebody about the outdoors. And that was like, to me, that was the most surprising thing is it was relatively easy. And I tied it to fundraising. It's essentially fundraising. You go in with an ask, you have a conversation, you present your topic, and you hope that they're going to want to buy in on whatever you're pitching.
I would imagine being an incredible storyteller would be a huge superpower with that, because that's the memorable experience that staffer is going to have with whoever they're, is trying to pitch something to them. Is how do you crafted a really incredible story that they'll maybe think about when they go home for dinner that night.
Yeah. I mean, you want to be memorable, right? You don't want to come in and just say, okay, here's the chart, here's this thing. You want to personify it. You're right. Like you make it so that it's something that people can understand. So when I had these meetings, a lot of what I spoke about was appropriations for the Forest Service, because from a SORBA perspective, that's our biggest land manager. We don't deal too much with, we don't have any BLM land. And so on a federal level, the appropriations to the Forest Service is really important for our mission. And I use the story that Natalie shares about the Pisgah Ranger District and the fact that they've got $6,000 a year to dedicate towards trails. And, you can't buy a used car for $6,000. That money doesn't go very far. And to take away even that small amount of money is hugely detrimental to the Forest Service, because that money allows our partners to get out there and do a great job on the forest that, our government looks after. So it allows that partnership to happen. Yeah.
Just think of the return on investment they're getting with $6,000.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd make that investment any day of the week.
The amount of money that Pisgah Area SORBA brings to the table, the amount of money that just tourism, even if Pisgah Area SORBA wasn't in the mix, like it's good that I think it's actually, it's a small amount of money. It's good that it's something, because it goes back to that story that you just told. Like if there's nothing there, you could say, well, they don't get anything, but $6,000 almost seems like a better story, even though they're getting something.
Yeah. And I think that's a small example of a bigger push. Going back to our summit, the thing that we're focusing on this year is maintenance. Making maintenance sexy is the inside title for what we're doing for the summit. And it's basically geared around the funding of maintenance. It is such a hard thing to find funding for. And for instance, like, again, I'll go back to the Brevard analogy. Like, you've got a town that they own Bracken Mountain, but that's the only trail system for the town. But they benefit economically from all this federal land, and being willing and able to put in investments into land that isn't city or county or state, it's federal land, but they're going to see the economic benefit from spending money on maintenance of those things. And I venture to guess you could say the same thing about state parks. Where I lived in Alabama, the city of Auburn did not own Chewacla State Park as a state park, but, putting money towards the maintenance of the trails at that state park benefits the local economy and benefits the local government. So why aren't appropriations being made, even if it's not owned property by this government entity? They can fund organizations like our chapters to do this maintenance work that, at the end of the day is an economic driver for so many communities across the Southeast.
Yeah, you just spurred my brain into another recent episode with Charles Evans, who's out of the Snowshoe, West Virginia area. And that was his thing, was talking about how, they're tackling maintenance through their Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Yeah. I've seen that model here in Knoxville. They're on the budget for some of the local governments, but we've really benefited post-COVID of a huge amount of trail development. And within the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner than that, there's going to be this incredible amount of maintenance that needs to be done and continued to be executed. That if it's not funded, relying on volunteer efforts, even as Herculean as they can be, isn't going to cut the mustard. Like that's just not going to happen. So we've got to start now preparing for what will be a huge maintenance backlog in the next 3 to 5 years. We got to start preparing for that now to get the idea out there that trail maintenance needs to be a funding avenue, no different than like a baseball field, a county park, those things. To mow grass at a soccer field complex is hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. Like, let's put a little bit of that same money into the trail networks so that they can be as maintained, if not better maintained, than some of these fields that don't see the same usage.
Yeah, you just brought up a point that I was going to bring up, which is, and I know this is preaching to the choir with every listener of this podcast, but like trails just see so much universal use, so much more universal use. It's, I mean, depending on the location, it could be a 24/7 thing. I know where I live, especially in the winter or these colder months, you see cross country skiers out cross country skiing on trails at like 4:30 in the morning to get their workout in before work. And it's interesting to see because everyone has headlamps. So you just see these little lights bopping through the woods, just like you would if you're night riding on a mountain bike. But you're thinking, how many people get up this early to do this? And the reality is quite a few people get up to do things at various times. I don't know how many people are playing soccer at 4:30 in the morning, or tennis or baseball or pickleball or whatever the sport is.
Yeah. But they're going for a trail run. They're going for a hike. They're taking the dog out. They're riding their mountain bike. They're doing those things at all hours of the day. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, we sold our souls for trails. Like we came in, every organization across the country did this. They came in, they're like, okay, if you just give us a little bit of space, we'll take care of everything on the trail. We'll pay for all of it. It'll all get taken care of by volunteers. And we kind of won that battle, like there's trails all across the country. And I think that we're at a point now where we got to change that narrative, or else it's going to be a really big problem. Because not only has there been an explosion in growth, but the types of trails have changed. And, having jump lines and feature-rich trail systems, that takes a special type of person to be able to maintain it with skills. It's not just a natural surface trail that's, a rake and ride that somebody built. That's, that type of trail is a ton of fun, but in order to make a jump line safe and rideable all the time, it requires continuous upkeep and continuous maintenance by a skilled person. And that costs money.
Let's take this back to Knoxville.
Yeah.
Because we're going to bring this one home, literally, for you.
Sounds good.
And we're going to take it back to IMBA. IMBA hosted, and I don't know if it was a partnership between AMBC and IMBA, or if it was just IMBA that showed up in Knoxville. But IMBA hosted a leadership conference this last fall that brought people from all over the country in. Let's talk about that quick before we talk about some other fun stuff in Knoxville.
Yeah. So Anthony Duncan approached us right about a year ago with the idea of wanting to host the first IMBA Summit in quite some time. I think the last one that I went to was in 2016.
Yeah, in Bentonville. That was the international. That was the last. I was at that one too.
And man, so the SORBA Summits are kind of geared off of those experiences. I thought those events were just so incredible and so inspiring. Like I always went home fired up, like wanting to go do some work. So Anthony approached us, and Anthony he works for IMBA, but he lives in Johnson City, so not far from Knoxville, and wanted to put on a leadership summit and wanted to have it in Knoxville because, they've spent a lot of time again in Bentonville with their trail labs and things like that. And they wanted to use Knoxville as an example of what's more obtainable by a local organization and has a more of a grassroots vibe to it. And of course we agreed. And, I love those types of events. I love being around a bunch of people and just having conversations. And I thought it would be great to highlight Knoxville because I use it in the same vein as like, this is a prime example of what a community can do with underutilized space and with a lot of drive and desire. So we had, I think it was around 50 people from across the country, and it was geared towards leadership and the idea of leveling up your organization and making sure that your organizations are sustainable for the future. Part of which is, hiring staff and making sure that you have somebody there that's willing to do the back end, non-exciting trail work stuff, administrative work. And it was great. It was so awesome to have people from across the country. Almost all the IMBA local staff was there. I got to meet a lot of them for the first time. And it was a good time to to learn. I think they put on an excellent program. I got to share a panel with Mike from CAMTB out in California. We've been a part of a quarterly conversation amongst other state level representatives, but this is the first time that he and I met in person. And, we live pretty parallel lives, a couple guys with camper vans and a dog that go around a large area and communicate with our chapters, and, learning the differences in their organization and then also the similarities. It was, I loved it. Grateful that IMBA wanted to put on the event in a SORBA Chapters hometown. And fortunately, it was my hometown, first ever conference that I've ever had where I lived, which was also convenient to go home and sleep in my own bed. So I've been here for about a year and a half. And, it's always great to ride a trail that you've ridden a bunch of times with somebody that has fresh eyes and see that excitement of somebody riding something for the first time, especially if it's become kind of normal to you. And you just get that, oh yeah, that is a really incredible trail experience. Like, we got to the bottom of Soup's On over in the Huron Get Down area. And our whole crew was just like, oh my God, that was so much fun. And it's like, oh yeah, that trail is pretty great. Like, we had a good time. Yeah, just sharing those experiences was good. I joked we needed to have a photograph of Trail Effect alumni there because there are so many people that had been on your podcast that were there in person. It was kind of nice to have that aspect too, to see all these personalities that you've hosted from across the country in person and be able to talk with them and have conversations. It was cool, man. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. And if I remember correctly, Michael Anselo and from California Mountain Bike Association, I think that's what it's called. He's from Georgia originally.
Yeah, he's from Georgia.
I don't think he was even a mountain biker when he was in the Southeast. And then now he's literally, like you said, living a parallel life.
Yeah. And I grew up in Atlanta area too. So we really we're roughly the same age. Like we lived very parallel lives. He's just on the West Coast now. But yeah, of all the people that I got to meet that weekend, he was a good time, man. It was, and then we went to DC the week after. So I got 2 full weeks of hanging out with Michael and just learning about what they do in California.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, California is such a different state. And so while there might be a lot of parallel things, it's probably really interesting to learn about just how they attack things differently.
Yeah. And they're a C4 where we're a C3. So that gives them an entirely different agenda and ability to, influence elections and things. So learning about that difference and why they went that route, it was pretty cool.
You can probably thank Marin County for that.
Yeah.
Let's stay in Knoxville and talk about Fall Fest. That's an annual fundraiser that just happened probably like 20 days ago or something like that as of recording this.
Yeah, that is my favorite day of the year now. This was, I think, my 3rd or 4th Fall Fest. Can't remember. Fall Fest usually get pretty blurry towards the end of the day anyways. But yeah, this one might be my favorite. And the event is the reason why I live in Knoxville. One of my very first experiences with the town was Fall Fest. And I was like, this is incredible. And it seems to only get bigger and better every year. This year's theme was, or they feature a trail in the trail system every year for some of their merch. And this year was AC/DC. And I always work the membership and info tent. So I'm there as a SORBA representative, looking up people's memberships and making sure that they're current and, encouraging people to join if they aren't. And I don't know, I had like a theme party. And so my partner in the membership tent, Aaron, we came up with the idea that we're gonna roll with the AC/DC theme. So I had on my best sport coat and shorts with a tie, and just really kind of leaned into it and had a ton of fun. And the weather was beautiful. It's like homecoming now that I've been there for a few times, because you see people from across the region, vendors and just general participants, see people you haven't seen in a year. Yeah. There's not enough good things to say about it. If you've never been to a Fall Fest in Knoxville, you're guaranteed to have a good time.
So I got to ask, did Matthew order a bunch of AC/DC themed foamy hats?
they've got foamy hats, they've got t-shirts, koozies, and it has a traditional AC/DC logo, but one of the identifying icons of Knoxville is the sun sphere. So on top of the Thunderbolt, they put a sun sphere icon on top of it. Also looks like a little bit like a microphone. Yeah, so there are the hats, shirts, koozies, and I'm guilty to say that I bought most of all of that.
It's all right. It's good. I mean, I'm going to say it's maybe a newer thing that I've at least noticed in the trail world, and that is being more purposeful on branding actual trails. And, like Howler Bike Park in Branson, Missouri, like they sell merch for all their different trails, and people buy like a t-shirt for Taco Cat or whatever whatever the favorite trail is. And I think, more communities are starting to do that. Copper Harbor does their fall art bike poster things where people make up a poster specific to a trail in that area. And so I think to really lean into a trail, like an actual trail theme is a good marketing angle.
Yeah. I mean, and it helps celebrate some of the work that people have done, like I haven't built any of those trails, but I could imagine if I were one of the ones that built AC/DC, and having the t-shirt, I'd be pretty stoked that they were like, yeah, they chose my trail this year to feature, and it's going to be the official merch of the year. Yeah. Like I love graphic designer background, I have an art background. So anytime people can be creative in other means outside of trail construction and support the trail organization, let's do it. Like, that sounds fun.
If I'm not mistaken, doesn't that trail go through Brian Hahn's front yard?
I don't know about his front yard, but it is certainly on his property.
Good stuff.
Got a number of bridges. It's a cool little trail.
Yeah, it is. I've ridden it with both Matthew and did a ride with Shaggy and Brian when I was there a handful of years ago now. Too long ago. I need to get back.
Yeah. Yeah, you're wearing your Windrock t-shirt or sweatshirt.
I do have a Windrock sweatshirt on. That's another very short bucket list place to go. I'm hoping the weather holds out over the winter that I can escape Wisconsin and do maybe a January Southeast tour, which would also include Brevard.
Of course.
That's always a last minute weather dependent decision, and maybe we'll see it happen.
Yeah. And let me know. I can at least at minimum hook you up with local folks, but happily join you on some trail out there too.
For sure. Well, let's wrap this one up, but we can't wrap it up without talking about Giving Tuesday one more time, and how I think it serves as a good reminder that even if you don't live in one of the 7 states that SORBA operates in, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably live in a state or a country that has a trail organization that could probably benefit from Giving Tuesday. So, or any other sort of donation type of effort. So let's wrap up with your Giving Tuesday campaign and how that impacts all organizations.
Yeah. The vast majority of fundraising for any nonprofit happens at the end of the year. And your local trail org, be it a SORBA organization, SORBA chapter, if you're in California, whatever, they all operate on a really, really thin budget. And I highly encourage you to make a meaningful donation to your local organization. And your definition of what meaningful is your definition of it. But whatever you feel like the value is that your trail organization brings to your local community, I hope that you make the effort to support them, both with your time and with a financial donation. Ours, this Root for the Future campaign is really investment into what some of our chapter leaders are calling SORBA 2.0. I kind of go back and forth on whether it's 2.0 or 3.0, but that's just beside the point. But it's really investment in the longevity of our regional organization and making sure that, not only SORBA from a regional perspective is healthy and will continue to grow, but that we can empower your local organizations to be effective leaders in your community and to advocate for the trails that you love to ride, to understand the best practices needed, to make sure that they have liability insurance, and can communicate with their members effectively. So if you want to donate, we've got a link on our website. It's really easy, sorba.org, SORBA.org. You can make a donation there. We partner with every.org to take a lot of our donations. And the reason why we use them is that you can use all sorts of different means. We can take cash donations, Venmo, PayPal, DAF funds, crypto, you name it. Like it can go through that every.org portal just so that we can make it easy and limit the excuses as to how you make a contribution to our organization.
Yeah. And with the Root for the Future campaign and the new membership initiative, as we talked about early on, hopefully I'm fairly certain that what you guys learned from this can be passed on to many other organizations, because I do know, as a person who's been in the conversations with local organizations, how to handle membership is probably one of the most difficult tasks for any organization, regardless of what the hobby is.
Yeah. And for the end user, it needs to be simple, regardless of who you are and what platform you use. When you're trying to get somebody to sign up and volunteer their time and voluntarily give you their money, it has to be simple. And that was one of the big driving forces behind this is looking for a solution that's going to be as simple as possible for people to join so that they can continue to support their organizations they love.
Yeah. Well, Philip, once again, I thank you for taking some time out of your day to help spread the message of SORBA, and so we can all learn about what's happening down in the Southeast, because it is a super powerhouse when it comes to mountain bike trails and mountain bike access. I mean, I've never quantified it, but I think like lately it seems like half my episodes come out of the Southeast and I'm not even in the Southeast. It just happens to be, where there's just a lot of action happening. And there's even your podcast, there's the Pisgah podcast, there's other podcasts that cover the Southeast, but it's just, there's a lot of stuff happening and it's a lot of good, positive things. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, but I think even more so, I love that you do feature so many of the people from across our region. Like, we've got a lot of great leaders. I just happen to be amongst a crowd of people that are highly passionate and really skilled at what they do. So, thank you for the opportunity for me to come on and talk, but even more so their voice and sharing their stories.
Well, thank you, Philip. Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dojustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.